Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. As always, I'm your host, the Game Master, and today we're talking about the original Android version of the Human Torch. But before we get into that, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and as always, be sure to leave us a comment, as that really helps us out with the YouTube algorithm. With all that said, let's dive into the adventure. The prologue to today's story takes place in the 1930s when the creator of the android known as the Human Torch, a man named Professor Horton, invites the press to his lab. He tells them that there's a problem with the android and that every time it's exposed to oxygen, it bursts into flames. He says he's named it the Human Torch, and he allows some oxygen to enter the glass tube that the android is stored in. As soon as the oxygen reaches it, it's flame on. One of the reporters urges Horton to destroy the Human Torch, but Horton refuses. So they tell him that for saying no to them, he will feel the full wrath of the press. A little time passes, and the media begins a smear campaign against the professor. As Horton reads about all of this in the newspaper in his private study, the phone buzzes, breaking the silence. He answers it and learns that various scientists want to see the android. He approves it, and that night, three of them come to his lab. One is from the National Academy of Sciences, one is from the Naval Research Laboratory, and one is from the American Association for the Advancement of Science. They examine the robot, and when they add oxygen to the tube, their instruments are unable to measure how hot it is. The needles go off the scale. So the visiting scientists urge Horton to destroy the android, but still he refuses. He says he's so close to learning how to control it. One of the men suggests encasing the Human Torch in concrete, saying that it will be safe there. And if Horton finds what he's looking for, then the android can be removed later. So the android is placed in a steel cylinder and lowered into wet concrete. Time went by, and almost everyone forgot about the Human Torch. Which brings us to the main plot of today's game. The day comes when there's an explosion in the early hours of the morning. The windows of Horton's house are blown out by force. As Horton clamors to get dressed, he wonders if that sound could have been the tomb of the Human Torch. He thinks it would be impossible, but then wonders if somehow crack formed, something that allowed a tiny bit of air into the casing. He runs outside, and sure enough, the casing that the android had been placed in is totally blown apart. Meanwhile, the Human Torch is in the city. The android is confused, looking at his own hands. He says, "I'm burning alive." People run from him as fires start. At this rate, he's going to burn the whole town down. He hears the clang of an old-timey fire truck's bell. He's curious and walks towards it. As the firemen hook up their hose to the nearest hydrant, the android says, "I like your bell," in a childlike voice. Firemen then hose him down, but the fires persist. All they succeed in doing is filling the street with steam. The Human Torch laughs and tells them it tickles. The Human Torch runs wild for a while before he encounters a tank of nitrogen, which seems to be what he needed all along. The nitrogen helps him control the flames, and after a bit, he learns how to control his powers even without the use of nitrogen. He learns to make fireballs, make a wall of flame, etc. So time passes, and the Human Torch finds himself on a streamliner train one day headed for Texas. With him on the train is Mr. Carson, owner of the Carson Explosives Company. The train has one of those newfangled television sets, and when they turn it on, they see images of UFOs attacking New York City. One person mistakes it for a news broadcast and is freaked out. Another passenger tells them it's just science fiction, which prompts them to have a conversation about Orson Welles and the broadcast he made last Halloween claiming that Martians had arrived on Earth. Just then, an actual UFO appears flying alongside the train. It uses an energy blast, destroying the track up ahead. Once the train comes to a stop, the UFO lands and the Martians approach Carson, demanding he give them the formula for something called trinitrotoluol. Carson says he'll never give them the formula. The Human Torch does his flame on thing, and the white Martian invaders see this and are terrified. As it turns out, most white Martians consider Hromnir to be the god of death and fire. In fact, they are so afraid of fire, they have a lost vulnerability to it with a range of 1 AP. So that means that if a white Martian comes within 20 feet of fire, their body drops to 4 APs. And in the close quarters of the train, that is exactly what happens when they fight the Human Torch. We roll initiative, and the white Martians go first, partially because they have super speed and the Human Torch does not. So one of them uses telepathy to read the mind of Mr. Carson and take the formula from him by force, which is a dice action. Then that white Martian trades his 2 automatic actions for another dice action, which he then uses to kill Mr. Carson. The other white Martian can't punch the Human Torch with his super strength without touching the fire. And he guesses that his heat vision would be useless if the Human Torch is immune to heat and fire. So he moves over to the wall of the train, which is an automatic action, and he rips some of the metal off, which is a dice action. He wants to throw the metal at the Human Torch, but he's out of actions for this turn. So it's the Human Torch's turn. Since the only human in the train car is already dead, the Human Torch multi-attacks both Martians with his flame project power. This cooks everything in the room, but with no innocent bystanders remaining, the Human Torch doesn't care. The white Martians are slain, and the entire train car melts. The Human Torch continues on to Texas to find Diane Carson, the daughter of the CEO. When he gets to her office, a man named Mr. Ritten is here, and he's demanding that Diane give him the formula. But she refuses, and the Human Torch notices that Ritten is holding an unlit cigar. The Human Torch wonders if Ritten is a Martian too, since they're shapeshifters. So he lights the cigar, but Ritten does not fear fire. So the Human Torch assumes he must be human. Ritten says the trinitrotoluol formula would allow him to make the most powerful explosion that the Earth has ever seen, and it would allow him to conquer the world. Diane says she will never cave to Ritten's demands. Ritten says, fine, have it your way, then attacks her. So the Human Torch attacks Ritten, knocking him out. Diane destroys the formula now that she knows there would always be some people who wanted to use it for war rather than its intended purpose, which was for mining. That night, more Martians show up, but they use telepathy on Diane while she's sleeping and learn the formula's been destroyed. So they go to Mars to tell the quote-unquote Great One that the formula has been destroyed. Which brings us to our epilogue. White Martians return to Mars in their ships, which are based on the UFOs from the 1953 War of the Worlds movie, by the way. They go to the throne room of the quote-unquote Great One, and we learn that their leader is literally Mars, Roman god of war. And just like in the 2009 animated Wonder Woman movie, this version of Mars/Ares has the broadcast empath power. It agitates those around him and incites violence. So the white Martians feel compelled to eradicate the green Martians, and the entire planet Mars is on the brink of extinction. To make matters worse, Ares feeds on violence. So the worse the war on the planet Mars becomes, the more physically powerful Ares becomes. Ares is disappointed that the trinitrotoluol formula was destroyed. If he had it, he could have killed all Martians, regardless of their color, and he would have channeled all of that energy to infinity gauntlet levels of power. Without it, he continues to guide the white Martians in their slaughter of their green victims. One of the green Martians is named Jean Jans. He has a wife named Miria Jans and a new baby named Kim Jans. Miria tells her husband that now that they have a baby, Mars is no longer a safe place to live. She begs him to smuggle them both to Earth on one of the UFOs. But Jean is a soldier and he doesn't want to run away and abandon his people. He tells her that for right now, he has to stay and fight. And he promises her he will keep their baby safe. But that's a story for another day. We had fun playing this one. I hope that you had fun listening to it. As always, be sure to smash that like button. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Leave us a comment because that helps with the algorithm. And I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.